Jordan Hudson, now coaching North Carolina football. Michigan fined $20 million due to sanctions due to sign stealing. We'll be breaking that down. Also, we'll be talking about week 0. We'll be previewing that, and we're going to be previewing the college football season. So we got a lot to get into. So definitely make sure that you stay tuned. Hey, welcome to the Anthony Balester YouTube channel. I'm your host, Anthony Balester. We got a lot to get into, as I stated before. We got Arch Manning. We're going to be talking about him having his first year as a starting quarterback for Texas. We're obviously also going to be previewing the SEC, the Big Ten, the ACC, and the Big 12. We're also going to be going through all the really big coaches and teams. So definitely make sure that you stay tuned. We're going to be talking about Bill Belichick and our predictions and expectations for him, Deion Sanders, Kalen, Deboer, and also much more. Also, before we get started, make sure you follow us across all social medias. We're on Twitter at Balester555 and on Instagram and TikTok and Anthony Balester. Also, make sure that not only do you watch this video, but subscribe to the YouTube channel. By you subscribing to our YouTube channel, we're able to build up that following, and we'll be able to continue to bring you these types of shows each and every week. We're going to be doing NFL shows as well. We'll be doing some minor things in UFC, but mainly it's going to be football, so definitely make sure to stay tuned with the great football season we have. Not only should you subscribe to this YouTube channel, but if you have any family members or close friends that you know that are just huge football junkies and love football, make sure to share this video to them. Also, make sure to hit that like button after you hit that subscribe button as well. It does very good for our algorithm. And again, it'll help us be able to bring you more of these types of videos. But yeah, we have a lot to get into this episode. It's our first ever episode doing this on the YouTube channel. So I'm very, very excited. Each and every week, it's going to get better and better. We'll get more comfortable and more familiar with everything. And each week, as the football season goes, we're going to get these crazy games, games to preview and react to. So definitely make sure to stay tuned. But as I stated before in the beginning of the video, we have a huge story here, probably the biggest story offside the football field in college football. And that is the Michigan Wolverines football team, who was hit with a $20 million fine. And Sherrone Moore has been suspended. He's going to be suspended for 2 games this season, which will fall into week 3 and week 4. And then he's also going to be suspended for another game in most likely week 1 of 2026. Now, obviously, this shouldn't hurt Michigan at all. There are 2 games that he will be suspended for this year will be Central Michigan. I don't think they need Sherrone Moore to win that. Obviously, Central Michigan, it's a team that can sneak up on you. But I think Michigan is too talented, has too many good players, and they do got some good assistant coaches in the meantime who can step in for Sherrone Moore. So I don't expect that to be a really bad issue for them. But Nebraska, that game, that's going to be the game where it probably will be affected. Nebraska's got a really solid team. You got a good, solid returning young quarterback. This is a team that's trying to build on what they did last year. I've been hearing, some camp intel that the receivers are doing much better than expected. Their defense should be good. Their offensive line should be able to protect for the young quarterback. So I feel like if there's any way that this can affect Michigan, it's probably going to be in the Nebraska game. So, but besides that, I really don't think it will affect much for Michigan. Obviously, the one game next year in week 1 shouldn't really affect them. I don't think they're playing anybody big at that time. So it shouldn't affect their overall record. They have no postseason ban. That's what a lot of people expected. Usually when you get these types of bans or penalties, it usually does come with some postseason ban or a revoke of some titles. Now, when the stealing of signs happened with Connor Stalions, it was during the Jim Harbaugh, J.J. McCarthy Michigan run. That's why Jim Harbaugh, had to be suspended for a little bit. and there was some other penalties as well. So this has just been an ongoing investigation, and this was the fallout of this. So in terms of, does it affect Michigan in terms of what they're going to be able to accomplish this year? Maybe for one game, but ultimately, if they're able to, win that game with the assistant coaches they have, I know Sherrone Moore has shown to be a really good coach, so it will probably affect it a little bit. But ultimately, I don't think it's going to be anything that they're going to sit there and say, "Oh, the suspension was what killed our season or hurt our playoff chances." I really don't think that's the case. If Michigan's a good enough team to make the playoffs this year, they'll be in the playoffs, regardless of the games that he is going to be suspended. It's not like he's suspended for the Ohio State game, which that would have been catastrophic. But I think what it will affect is now people's opinions and the way that they view Michigan's title. Now, is their championship going to be has any sort of asterisk going to be put on it? What's the legitimacy of that college football championship? In my opinion, I really don't think it affects or takes away anything Michigan did. Michigan beat some really good quality teams that year to win the national championship. They did have to go through Alabama in the semifinals, and then ultimately they still had to go up against Michael Penix and Kalen Deboer on that really good Washington Huskies team, and they beat them pretty good in the national championship. So I think Michigan's title is still legitimate. I'm not taking anything away from them. What Jim Harbaugh did with that team, starting off, with what was, kind of a not a really good program at the time. They were going through coaches. They kept coming up short to Ohio State. And then after losing to Ohio State a few times with Urban Meyer, Jim Harbaugh finally got that to turn around. Now you're looking at a Michigan team who has beaten Ohio State, I believe, 3 straight years in a row. So it's pretty much the reverse of what we had before. So yeah, I know there's some allegation of the sign stealing, but I think Michigan still had to go out there at the end of the day on the field and outperform a lot of elite talent. And I think that they would have done that either way without the sign stealing. I know that's going to be something that a lot of people are going to disagree with, and understandably so. But I wouldn't take anything away from what Jim Harbaugh and this Michigan team has done, and what the turnaround of this program has done. Either way, Jim Harbaugh was turning around this program one way or another. It was his alma mater, and he wasn't going to leave any stone unturned. And I think he did a very good job. And I'm not going to take anything away from Jim Harbaugh, and I think that the championship is still legitimate. If you want to put an asterisk on it, I don't blame you, but I'm not. And, as far as I'm concerned, the Michigan Wolverines, were the 2023 national championships. And I think at the end of the day, that's never going to change. Now we get to finally get to some of the on-field stuff this year. And since we do have week 0, there's not a whole lot of games to break down. So this is a perfect week for us to ultimately get into the season preview. So we're going to be going through some games. We're going to be going through some teams, some conferences, and pretty much doing our predictions and what we think about some players and coaches heading into the season. We got to start off with the biggest, first-year starter as a new quarterback this year, and that's going to be Arch Manning. Arch Manning now is headed into the season with the Texas Longhorns and Steve Sarkisian as his first year as the starting quarterback. Now, I know he does have some other starts, but this is his first actual year where he's got to go through an entire offseason where they were able to game plan and prepare him as a starter. Running with the ones and the first team all offseason. Now we get to see what Arch Manning can really do. Now they got a couple game tapes on him from the few starts he has, but I don't think that's going to have anything to do with what we're going to see. It's a completely different story when you got your backup who comes in for a couple games compared to when you have an entire offseason to game plan with Arch Manning's skill set. I do think Quinn Ewers was a really underrated college quarterback. Now, in my opinion, I think he should have came back. I think he could have entered the transfer portal, got a few $1 million more than, got a hell of a lot more money than what he got in the 7th round going to Miami Dolphins. And I think he needed one more year to build out his skill set. But at the end of the day, he didn't want to go to a different team. And the reason why he didn't want to go to another team, he loves Texas. And he couldn't go back to Texas because of one man and one man only, and that's Arch Manning. Arch Manning has been considered as the more talented quarterback, but Arch Manning was the guy who was there before. He was more experienced, and it made sense for Arch Manning to sit and learn, a very sophisticated offense in the Steve Sarkisian system, and I think we're going to see him flourish. I think if you look at the history of the Mannings with Peyton Manning, Eli Manning, these are guys who like to take their time and do everything right. They know the quarterback position is a very tough position, and they don't want to rush anything. We've seen other quarterbacks, maybe, depending on how his future goes, like Anthony Richardson and others who kind of rushed their way to the NFL with not a lot of starts, and or other quarterbacks that want to transfer because they want to play year one or year two. And ultimately, it's not that bad to sit. I feel like, especially in an offense like this, that you're going to have players around you, and you're going to be put in reasonable and favorable positions. It makes sense to sit. But now we get to see what Arch Manning can really do. The guy is big, strong, athletic. He's nothing like his brothers. Well, or nothing like his uncles. But the funny thing is, the one of the Manning brothers, you got Eli Manning, Peyton Manning, and Cooper Manning. Cooper Manning is the one who was a former receiver and had a scholarship, but ultimately had some health issues why he couldn't play. But he's athletic. Same with the grandfather, Archie Manning. These guys can run and move. What makes Arch Manning so scary is he's got that mobility, but then he's got the quarterbacking, the arm strength, and the accuracy and the mental makeup of Peyton. So it's almost like if you take Peyton Manning and Eli Manning, make them stronger, make them more athletic. I mean, that's a scary recipe for any defense. So we're gonna finally see what this guy could do. This guy get rated on the scene as a 14, 15-year-old high school freshman and dominated as well. And then obviously dominated throughout the rest, getting bigger, faster, stronger. And now he's a guy who's 6'4", probably over 220, 225, at least close to 220. And he's probably going to be running just as fast as Josh Allen runs. And then you add in the fact that he's developing and training under Peyton Manning, Eli Manning. I mean, man, if this guy could put it all together, this is going to be one of the best quarterbacks we've ever seen in college and maybe a future number one overall pick. Now, I do think he will stay 2 years. I don't think no matter what happens, I mean, maybe unless they win the national championship, he's undoubtedly the Heisman Trophy winner. I think they value having multiple seasons as a starting quarterback. If you look at the track record in the NFL, most successful quarterbacks have had 2 years of starting. I think Arch Manning wants to do that as well. And I think playing for Steve Sarkisian with all these players around him and all the great receivers, he's not going to have a season where he's not going to have the players around him. The players around him are only going to get better. So I think Arch Manning is going to stay for 2 seasons, and he's going to be able to prove what he could do and improve on certain things. So we shall see his growth. Obviously, at this point, it's a complete unknown. But I expect Arch Manning to come right in as a first-year starter and be one of the best players in college football, do it again next year, and then probably be the number one overall pick in 2027. But I can't wait to see, a Manning that's that big and that athletic and that strong to see what kind of system they're going to be able to run. And with Quinn Ewers, who was a little on the smaller side, couldn't really take hits and stay healthy, wasn't the most athletic guy. Now you get an Arch Manning guy who's complete night and day difference in style. I think it opens up this playbook more for Steve Sarkisian. So I'm very excited to see how he does. Speaking of, guys that I'm excited to see, and the guy who's going to have a lot of pressure because it's not his first year now, and that is Kalen Deboer. Kalen Deboer now has headed into his second season now as the Alabama head coach. Now, he's taken over for the greatest coach of all time, and there isn't a tougher guy to replace than the GOAT, Nick Saban. Now, before we start the season, I want to show you guys my alliances. Alabama is my team. And so I want to let you know I'm not biased at all. I'm going to give you guys fair assessments, but my alliance is with Alabama. I'm not going to favor from that. The reason why we have the 18th on the helmet is because that's how many national championships we have. Hopefully someday Kalen Deboer can add to that, and maybe one day I could have this helmet say number 19. That's the hope. But you know what? That's not really the expectation I have this year for Kalen Deboer. I'm not expecting a national championship. There's some other teams, I believe, who are much more talented, especially now with Kalen Deboer, with obviously he's older, but kind of a first-time starting quarterback in Ty Simpson. They do got some young talented guys on the roster as well with Keelan Russell and Austin Mack, who are super, super superb talents that ultimately I think will get them to the promised land, but it won't be this year. I think Ty Simpson has paid his dues. He's sat down for a couple years, and I think this is the year where they can finally make the playoffs, but I don't think that they'll win the championship. I think it will be a step in the right direction. I think Jalen Milroe was a much more talented quarterback than Ty Simpson, but I think Ty Simpson is going to be a better passer and be able to run the offense more efficiently and be a really good game manager. I know this team really disappointed in 2024. Obviously, when you replace a coach like Nick Saban, some fans are demanding national championships every year. But I was more realistic. I said, hey, it's a 12-team playoff. Don't win the national. You don't have to win the national championship. Just get into the dance. Now, ultimately, they were one of the best teams who didn't get into it. But, man, there was some disappointing losses. There was some great wins, like the one against Georgia. But, man, there was some disappointing losses. The Oklahoma loss, I mean, that really killed them right there. Oklahoma was a struggling team, and they looked like a college football team when Alabama went up against them. And then, obviously, in the bowl game, when they went up against Michigan, they just looked like they weren't ready to play. And I think Alabama's the type of team that they really don't do good in bowl games because once they realize they're not in the playoffs, I think a lot of their players kind of check out, and I think we saw that. But this is a team now with Ty Simpson, who I think with what's going to be a great defense and some great receivers around them. And I know they have the injury to their running back, Miller. But I think when he gets back, I think this is a quarterback that can manage the game and not turn the ball over. And you won't get the highs that you had from Jalen Milroe, but you also won't have the lows as well. When you look at this team defensively, this is going to be, your typical Alabama-style defense. You're going to think that this was a Nick Saban coach defense with the talent they got. They're going to have one of the most talented, if not the most talented secondary in college football with guys that could go 2 to 3 deep at these positions. Their backups and third strings on defense are going to be better than some of these good team starters. You got Kalen Sabb, you got Bray Hubbard, you got Xavier Brown. These guys, and that's just the start of it. These guys are going to be so impactful, and the guys behind them, there really isn't much drop-off. And then you look at L.T. Overton at the edge rusher position who decided to come back, who could have been a first-round pick. You do got Deontay Lawson coming back at linebacker. We shall see how he recovers from his injury. But this is a team who I think will have one of the best defenses in college football. I think with Ryan Williams, who's the second-best receiver in college football, at just 18 years old as a sophomore, I think this is a team that as long as Ty Simpson can manage the game with their defense, I think they can be a 10-win team. And we know that in the college football 12-team playoff era, 10-2 usually is good enough to get you into the playoffs. Now, when you get to 9-3, you're probably out of it. 10-2, you should make it. 11-1, it's a guarantee. But I see this team winning around 10 games and sneaking into the playoffs and maybe going to the second round to the playoffs and maybe being into the final 8. And I think that would be a step in the right direction. And I think that's a season that all Alabama fans will take. I think Ryan Williams is a stud, one of the best players in college football. And with all the great receivers Alabama's had, with Devontae Smith, Amari Cooper, and others, I think this guy might have the highest ceiling. And we shall see what he progresses in. But I'm not worried about him. I'm not worried about this defense. Obviously, Ty Simpson's an unknown. But I think with Kalen Deboer, who's shown a good track record with quarterbacks, I'm pretty confident that he'll be able to manage the game. Speaking of the rest of the SEC, we're going to preview and give our thoughts on how the rest of the conference and what the outlook of that's going to be. For the SEC, when we look at some of these teams, I think LSU is going to be better. This is a team that, with these star players that they have with Jaden Daniels, Malik Neighbors, Brian Thomas Jr., and then Garrett Nussmeier, it's a team that kind of always came up short. And their defense has been struggling, surprisingly. I think Garrett Nussmeier was a quarterback who had his highs but also had his lows where he was making some really bad passes. But I think when everything's clean, I think if he can make the next step and be more consistent, this is the NFL first-round quarterback. And we know LSU's got a track record to where when they have these fifth-year senior quarterbacks like Joe Burrow and Jaden Daniels, they just popped her last year. And, everybody in LSU and Louisiana is expecting Garrett Nussmeier to be that next guy. I think that they got some good transfers at wide receiver, so I expect their receiver room to be better. I think their running backs with the young guys they got will be better. They got so many defensive starters in the transfer portal, so I expect their defense to be better. The only thing that I'm going to be questioning on is their O-line. They lost some good O-line to the draft, and you got to protect Garrett Nussmeier. He's a quarterback that if he's not kept upright, he's going to be struggling a lot. So I think LSU is going to be much better, and I think they're going to take a step in the right direction with Brian Kelly, who's trying to finally get to that next step with this team. And we know every stop that Brian Kelly's had before LSU, he's been successful, and he's always left that team in a better place than they were before, and he's going to continue to try to do it with LSU. We got Georgia. They just continue to do a reload. I think now their O-line is going to be one of the best in the country. They return a lot of starters there. They have pretty much all 5 of their linemen are going to be all-conference preseason guys. Their wide receiver room, that's going to be a huge improvement. They're not going to be having guys dropping easy passes. You got Zachariah Branch and others who I think are really going to help out that receiver room flourish. And I think that's going to be one of their strengths. We know their defense is always going to be great. They're always going to have great edge rushers. They're always going to have great linebackers led by C.J. Allen, who could be a first-round pick, one of the top linebackers in college football. I think their question is Gunnar Stockton the guy? Gunnar Stockton was a talented guy who kind of sat behind Carson Beck, had some good moments when he came in towards the end of the season last year for Beck's injury. Is he the guy that's going to be able to get this team back to the promised land? And can he be like what Stetson Bennett was a couple years ago? I think he's got all the talent to do it, but that's my one question with him. Obviously, when we were just talking about this team, but you got Texas. I think Texas is the best team in the SEC. I think with the players that they got, with Ryan Wingo, Colin Simmons on defense, Anthony Hill Jr., this is going to be one of the most talented teams on the offense and defensive side of the ball. I think they got some great running backs. They got great receivers. We just got to see what their offensive line is going to do. But with an athletic quarterback like Archie Manning, I expect their offensive line, even if they're, just slightly above average, I think with Archie Manning's mobility, I think he'll be able to make up for it. They got two great running backs as well. This team doesn't really have many weaknesses. And this is a team that finished in the final four teams the last 2 years in a row. So I don't expect any drop-off. If anything, I expect this to be probably the best Texas team so far since Steve Sarkisian's been there. When you look at some other teams like South Carolina, I think Lenore Sellers may be the most talented quarterback in college football, including Arch Manning. This guy's over 6'4", probably like 230 pounds. He's super athletic. He's probably going to end up running a 4.5, 4.6. He's got a cannon of an arm. He just got to take the next step. And the way he ended the season last year, he looks like he's making that next step. And if he makes the next step in terms of his accuracy, this is going to be a Heisman contender while also maybe being a potential top number one pick in the NFL draft. He's a young quarterback, just 19, 20 years old. But given his age, I think that's why I have high expectations for him to take that next step. Obviously, they're going to have a really good defense. They did lose some guys, some defensive linemen in the draft, but they bring back their best defensive player with Dylan Stewart. They almost lost him to their transfer portal, but I heard rumors that they gave him a good check. So I expect him, to be a part of a really good defense. I think Beamer's got this team, going in the right direction. And I think South Carolina is going to be a team that's going to be, again, probably between that 8 to 10 win mark and be competing for one of those last, playoff spots. Florida is a team that ended really hot last year. Billy Napier had a really young team. And not all these guys now that were young are going to be, another year experience. DJ Lagway, this team will go as far as he can. He's a future Heisman contender. He's one of the top quarterbacks to come out of high school. And I think with him, with Bogg at running back, with Wilson, the speedy receiver, I think this is a team that's going to have a really, really scary offense. Then you look at their defense. They're going to have one of the best D-lines in college football with Banks, Sapp, and McCray. This is going to be an experienced defensive line. Obviously Banks and Sapp are upperclassmen who probably could have won the draft last year. And those guys are looking like first or second round picks. So I expect Florida, maybe the one weakness may be we have to see how their secondary is going to play out. But I love their linebackers. I love their D linemen and edge rushers. And I love what their offense is going to be. So it's going to come down to, can DJ Lagway be what he's built up to be? Auburn, I expect them to be improved. I still think that they're a year away from being in the playoffs, but this is a team that Hugh Freeze has to take the next step. We got to see some sort of improvement. They finally brought in maybe potentially their answer at quarterback in Jackson Arnold. We shall see how he's going to do. He's going to have the receivers, though. You have Cam Coleman, one of the most talented receivers in college football. He can make great one-handed catches. He can run great routes. He's a future NFL draft pick. You got Malcolm Simmons. You're bringing in Eric Singleton, who could be a first, second-round NFL draft pick as well. So Arnold's going to have all the pieces there to succeed. It's can they get it out of him, and is Hugh Freeze the right guy? Well, now they have the talent. There's no excuses of why this team can't be a 7-win team at least this year. Texas A&M, it's going to come down to Marcel Reed. Can Marcel Reed make the next step? He's been a great runner, but can he be a good passer? This team's going to have great running backs with Owens and Moss coming back from injury. This team's going to have a really solid offensive line, and they're always going to have the talent on defense. It's can Mike Elko, work in the SEC, and can Marcel Reed make the next step? I got faith in him, but we shall see. And if he takes the next step, Texas A&M's looking like a playoff team as well. Oklahoma is a team that I definitely want to mention in the SEC. Oklahoma's got the talent with the players that they return, with the transfer portal they brought in John Mateer, who's going to be one of the best quarterbacks in the country. I think he could run, he could throw the ball. He's going to be one of the most accurate quarterbacks in college football. He's very experienced now. He's one of the top quarterbacks last year at Washington State. And now going to the SEC, I think a lot of people and more eyeballs are going to be able to see him now. Because let's be honest, who was watching Washington State last year? But I think what's going to hurt this team, even with the great defensive linemen they have, with Deion Burks at wide receiver coming back from injury, that this team has the talent and the capability to be a 10-win team. But, man, that schedule is daunting. And I think that their schedule is going to be so hard that while they may be a 10-win caliber team that you don't want to play, I think that schedule is going to knock them down to probably around 8 or 9 wins, which ultimately will probably end up being the difference of them being in the playoffs or not. But don't sleep on Oklahoma. They're one of the most talented teams in the country, and it just speaks to the depth of the SEC. The SEC this year is going to be, which it is most years usually. I know they haven't won the championship in the last couple of years, but in terms of depth, this is going to be one of the deepest, conferences, probably the deepest conference in college football. This is a conference that's got 11 plus teams who are all worthy of being in the playoffs. But ultimately, because of your schedules and playing against each other, we're only going to get maybe 3 to 5 of those teams in the playoffs. But I think they got 11 teams who are all top 25 caliber teams, and we shall see how this plays out. And what makes the SEC so competitive and so compelling is the team that you think may be that 11 team can end up being that second or third team. So we shall see how this finish. You got Tennessee, who did have to let go Nico Iamaleava, rightfully so. The guy who was sitting out, trying to do a holdout in college for potentially more money. And I think if they would have given them more money or let him come back, I don't think that puts the right word or right vibe in the locker room. That's not going to set the right tone, and I think other players will start doing that. I think by letting him go to UCLA and kind of kicking him off the team, I think Josh Heupel made the right decision. And not only did I think he made the right decision helping out the locker room in Tennessee, I think he helped out every locker room, showing the players that, yeah, you guys deserve to be paid. Yeah, you guys deserve everything you guys are getting. But there's got to be a line that you draw. And at some point, the team has to be more important than the individual players. But, I think because they lost their quarterback, yeah, they got a good transfer quarterback, but he's not nearly the level or talent as Nico was. So I do think while they do have a great defense with NFL draft picks, with maybe potentially the top cornerback in this draft with McCoy, Jermaine McCoy at corner, I think this is a team that's going to take a step back and probably doesn't repeat and make the playoffs last year. And I can see this team being probably right around an 8-win team that is a top 25 team because of the players that they have around the quarterback, but ultimately probably is just on the outside looking into the playoffs. Lastly, the team I want to talk about in the SEC is Ole Miss. They obviously got to replace Jackson Dart, who went first round to the Giants, who was a very talented quarterback that ran Lane Kiffin's offense very well. They're going to have a good defensive line and great defense. They got great depth at wide receiver again. Obviously, Lane Kiffin's always going to figure out a way to coach up the offense. Perkins on the edge rusher / linebacker position, he's a guy who could do a lot of different things, very versatile. I see him being very impactful for this program. But Austin Simmons, we talk about quarterbacks being talented. This is another one of those guys who has all the talent in the world, and I would not be surprised if Austin Simmons was a breakout player and ended up being maybe an NFL caliber player. I think obviously maybe for him, he probably needs 2 years. He's very young. He's just 19, 20 years old, but he's big, fast, and strong. We've seen, with his talent, even with Jackson Dart, they couldn't keep him off the field. They had certain packages for him. And I think we shall see what he can finally do. And like I said, I would not be surprised being coached by Lane Kiffin, who's great with quarterbacks, to see Austin Simmons be one of the breakout players in the SEC and in the country this year. I don't think that they're a playoff caliber team, but I do think that they're one of these SEC teams that are a top 25 caliber team. So ultimately, when I look at the SEC, in my prediction for how this conference is going to work out and play out, I can see, I think Texas wins it. I just think that they're way too talented to not win the SEC this year. I just think that this is the best team that Steve Sarkisian's had with Arch Manning and Ryan Wingo and others. So I think Texas wins the SEC. I think with the talent that Georgia has, I think they're going to be in the playoffs. I think Alabama will take a step forward with Kalen Deboer. And I think that with Ty Simpson managing the game and that great defense, I think they're a playoff team. And I think LSU, with all the transfers they brought in, bringing back Garrett Nussmeier, who I think is going to take the next step as well. I think Brian Kelly finally gets to the playoffs. So I got Texas win the SEC. I got Georgia, Bama, and LSU in the playoffs. And I got South Carolina, Florida, Oklahoma, Texas A&M, Ole Miss, and Tennessee all being pretty much in the top 25 and be very competitive. And teams that can play spoiler or also maybe actually end up making the playoffs, if they surprise some people. Like I said, the SEC is so deep that one of these teams could make the playoffs, and I don't think no one would be surprised. So now we're going to transition to, some headlines that we have in this next biggest conference in college football, and that's going to be the Big Ten. Obviously, the Big Ten, we got to talk about Lincoln Riley and USC. I think Lincoln Riley has a lot of pressure on him. He's a coach who I really loved. Being what he did, at Oklahoma, this was a guy who was perennially winning 10 to 11 games every year. Heisman Trophy winner after Heisman Trophy winner. It seemed like he was going to be able to have an easy transition and do the same thing at USC. His first year, did the same thing. He got, a Heisman Trophy winner with Caleb Williams. And then, I believe he won 11 games that year. And then ultimately after that, it kind of went downhill. The next year with Caleb Williams, they weren't successful. And then they even had another step back year being even worse. They went from 11 wins to 8-5 to 7-6. And that's not, the standard for Lincoln Riley. And I know you go from playing in the Pac-12 to now you're playing in the Big Ten. So obviously, you got more travel on your players. You got a much harder schedule. You're playing against much better teams. But the Pac-12 was a pretty strong, conference. And, even when his last season in the Pac-12, he went 8-5. So I don't think that this is a scenario where Lane Kiffin has to make the playoffs. I still feel like that, they're a few players away from making that. But I think this is a team that has to be vastly improved from last year. They cannot be a 6 or 7 win team like they were last year. I think, now having another starting quarterback with Jaden Mayava, we shall see if Lincoln Riley could get him to flourish. Miller Moss had his moments last year, but I think he was a step down there from what Lincoln Riley typically does have. I do see this team being better. Like I said, they can't win 6 or 7 games. If they win 6 or 7 games again, I think this is a head coach that could be on the hot seat. I think he's on the hot seat now. And I don't think he needs to make the playoffs to save his job, but he damn sure better be better than 7 wins, or he will be on the hot seat. And there are going to be some boosters out there saying like, hey, maybe we need to buy this guy's contract out and move on from him. So we shall see. This guy's got some talent. I think they got some good defensive players now. So I look for a much more better defense. And I think with the receivers they have, Jacoby Lane and Malachi Lehman is going to be one of the best duos at wide receiver. So with them, now entering his second year as a starting quarterback, Jaden Mayava, who was a young guy last year, now he's the old guy now. So now we need to see, can Lincoln Riley get him to flourish? Ultimately, my prediction is I see this team around, 8-4 team. And I think that would be a good enough, season for Lincoln Riley. I think that would silence a lot of the doubters and be a step in the right direction to what could be a future playoff team in 2026. But, man, Lincoln Riley's got some pressure on him. And I'm not saying he's going to get fired if he wins 6 games, but I would not be surprised if there's people and mentions and rumors about, if this team starts off very, very slow. And, we're looking at another 6 or 7 win type season. I think Lincoln Riley is going to have to be looked at, and we can't just keep chalking up as, he's Lincoln Riley. He's got all these Heisman Trophy winners. He's been to the playoffs before. At USC, you got to get it done. They fired coaches who have won similar amounts of games because the standard at USC is much higher. And now being in the Big Ten, the standard's even that much more higher. So he doesn't need to make the playoffs, but like I said before, Lincoln Riley damn sure better win at least 8 games, I think, to at least get his his ass, off the hot seat. Then when we look at some other teams and some other coaches, we got Ryan Day and Ohio State. They won the national championship last year. Obviously, they didn't beat Michigan, but this is the team that I really think was the best team last year. Whether they beat Michigan or not, who cares? They won the national championship. Yeah, Michigan fans are saying, "Oh, you lost to us." Yeah, we won the rivalry game, but you know damn sure Michigan would trade that win for another national championship. So I think Ryan Day and Ohio State, the defending champions, Ryan Day, there's no more talk about him. I don't care if he didn't beat Michigan. There's no hot seat for Ryan Day when you win a national championship. And this is a team that does have the talent to potentially repeat. I do think they'll be one of the best teams in the country again. The only thing is they got to replace a lot of guys. They're got to replace their quarterback in Will Howard, and now they're going to have a first-year starter in Julian Sayin. Julian Sayin is a guy who was a five-star recruit, so we know we've seen this story before where Ohio State replaces their quarterback, but they got a five-star coming in. We've seen that when they lost Justin Fields, and you had a guy as talented as C.J. Stroud come in. Ultimately, there was no step back, and C.J. Stroud was just as good, if not better, than Justin Fields. Julian Sayin could do that same thing. And when you look at this team, I don't think they'll have the depth as they did last year. You lost the best running back duo in college football with Henderson and Judkins, but they still got some good running backs. They did lose some linemen, offensive linemen, so that scares me a little bit. And they lost a lot of D linemen. So I think in the trenches, they got a lot of young guys who got the talent, but we have to see if they can prove it on the field. But this is a team who is going to be having the best offensive player in college football this year in Jeremiah Smith. They're going to have the best defensive player in college football this year in Caleb Downs. Just those two alone makes your roster a really, really competitive team. And we know they got more than that. They got Carnell Tate on the opposite side of Jeremiah Smith, and they got some other really good players in the secondary as well. So I see this team being a competitive team. I definitely think this is a team that's going to make the playoffs. I just don't see them repeating with a first-year starting quarterback. I think maybe they're a year away from being able to win another national championship with the losses they've had along the defense, offensive line, and quarterback. And I think Julian Sayin is going to have a few growing pains, but ultimately by the end of the season, he was a five-star recruit for a reason. I really am high on Julian Sayin. I think it's going to take some time, and I think that this is a team that may not win the national championship again, but I could definitely see him making the playoffs. And I could definitely see him going far in the playoffs as maybe a semifinal team or, in one of the final, 8 teams in the playoffs when it's all said and done. Speaking of the rest of the Big Ten, when we look at some of these other teams, Penn State, with James Franklin, this is going to be his most talented team that he's had. I think that this is a Penn State team that, has the talent to win it all. James Franklin has had his struggles against teams like Ohio State and ultimately just in overall against teams, who have been ranked in the top 5 and top 10. But this is the year where he's got the talent. And if there's ever going to be a year to get it done, it's this year. You got Drew Aller, who when he's on. He's 6'4", 6'5", 230 pounds with a cannon of an arm. I know I said it before, and a lot of people clown me for it, but being in Buffalo as a Bills fan, I know I'm better than anybody. This is a guy who's got Josh Allen-type potential. Now, to have Josh Allen-type potential and actually be Josh Allen are completely two different things. We've seen quarterbacks like Anthony Richardson, who we thought had Josh Allen potential, and so far that hasn't worked out too well. But he's got that talent. And we've seen in moments where he has shown that, and it has shown really good accuracy. But we've also seen moments where he makes throws that, average college quarterbacks can make. So if Drew Aller can make the next step, and become one of those top quarterbacks in college football. And I think the fact of him returning another season, even though he could have been a first, second-round pick, I think that goes to show you how committed this guy is and, how confident he is he can make the next step. Then when you look at this team's running backs, this team's going to have a similar running back duo to Ohio State had last year. What helped Ohio State last year so much was their running back duo. Well, this team's going to have a similar situation with Nick Singleton and Katron Allen. Yeah, they lost on defense. They lost Abdul Carter. But this team brings back so many great players. They're going to have one of the top linebacking cores. They got a great defensive line led by future NFL draft pick Zane Durant. They got a first-round talent at corner in Harris. They're going to have one of the best, All-Americans everywhere on offensive line, so one of the best O-lines. Obviously, the only concern is what I said is, can James Franklin get over the hump? This is a team that obviously last year also struggled at wide receiver, but I think with the transfer guys they brought in and with some of the young guys they got going to their next season, I think this is going to be a position that's no longer going to be a weakness for them. So when you look at this roster, they don't have really any weaknesses other than the fact of can Drew Aller be more consistent and can James Franklin, beat one of these top teams. Oregon is another team that I want to talk about. They've been a perennial playoff team. They're going to have another new quarterback, but we know typically whatever quarterback plays for Oregon, they've been successful. Dante Moore, the guy who's coming in now, replacing Dillon Gabriel, was a 5-star recruit. He's not a first-year starter because he did start as a freshman for UCLA. And unlike other quarterbacks who would transfer to start somewhere else, this guy transferred to be a backup. No one, he needed to sit back, learn a system, learn the position. And I think that shows you what type of kid he is and, where his mental toughness is. A lot of quarterbacks don't have, they have too big of an ego to sit there and take a step back and know they're not going to start, but knowing they're going to benefit in the future and later down the line. I think the fact that Dante Moore did that speaks to how well I think he is going to play. I think that they're going to have probably the best offensive line in college football. They got first, second round draft picks throughout the entire offensive line. Their pass rush with Ungule and others is going to be one of the most talented pass rushers in college football. We just got to see can a 20-year-old Dante Moore flourish, which I think, with the offensive coordinating and coaching this team has and, the track record and with the talent that Dante Moore has with learning the system for an entire year, I think Dante Moore is going to be very successful. I think the one question is the receivers. Obviously, Evan Stewart's going to be out for the foreseeable future. Hopefully he can come back, at the end of the year in the playoffs, but losing him is a huge, hit. He's probably the best returning receiver, he's probably one of the best return receivers. Can't forget about Jeremiah Smith and Ryan Williams, but in terms of just guys who could have went to the NFL draft, because we know Jeremiah Smith and Ryan Williams couldn't, they weren't eligible, they're too young. For the guys who've been in college football for 3-4 years who could have went to the draft and decided to return, I think Evan Stewart was the best one of those guys. And the fact that he got hurt definitely hurts this team. And they're going to have to rely on one of the top, recruits and Decurion Moore. Now, we've seen, the last few years, there's been a lot of great freshman receivers, as I just said, with Jeremiah Smith and Ryan Williams. And Decurion Moore could be that next guy who could come right in and be a team's number one receiver as a freshman. This guy's been dominating high school football since he's been a 14-year-old freshman. And now he's going to come in and try to do the same thing in college as an 18-year-old freshman. So I have a lot of faith in him. But I think this is a team that was really, really hurt by, Evan Stewart being hurt. But I think with the running backs that they're going to have and the offensive line they have, I think ultimately that will make up for the young, youth at receiver and ultimately still help Dante Moore flourish. So I still see this team as being successful. Michigan is a team that I think is going to reload on defense. They got, some unproven wide receivers, but, they should have another guy break out or two guys break out. I think they're going to have a really, really good running back, committee or, maybe a guy that could finally break out from that committee. You got Marshall, you got Justice Hayes coming in as a transfer. So I think their running backs are going to be solid. I think they'll find one guy to break out a wide receiver. They're going to still have a really good offensive line. And we know Michigan's always going to have a really, really good defense. So I expect their defense to be really good. But ultimately, again, it's going to come down to their freshman quarterback. They're going to be most likely starting an 18-year-old freshman quarterback in Bryce Underwood, who they paid millions and millions of dollars to come to their school. This is a guy who would look like he was going to go to LSU or other schools, but Michigan, I think paid a little extra to get him. This may be the most, and this is saying a lot because we had a lot of great quarterbacks like Trevor Lawrence and others. Since I've been watching college football and, at 28 years old, I've been watching, college football really, really heavily and been a hardcore fan since 2009. I think Bryce Underwood is up there with some of the best, most talented quarterbacks I've ever seen come out of high school. This guy is already over 6'4", over 230 pounds. He's not built like a freshman at all. And he's a guy who even, we've seen receivers and running backs dominate high school as a 14-year-old. But this guy dominated as a quarterback in high school as a 14-year-old and pretty much was the freshman of the year, sophomore of the year, junior year of the year, and then one of the top seniors as well. So this is a guy who has the track record to be one of the best quarterbacks. And I could definitely see it. But just as his first year starting, I think he's going to have some growing pains. And I think this is a team that will be competitive. But I think that, with the 18-year-old quarterback, they're going to be a year away. But don't get me wrong. Bryce Underwood, I believe, is going to be a Heisman Trophy potential winner within a year or two. And ultimately, I think when he enters the draft after 3 years, is going to probably end up being the number one pick in the draft and one of the best college quarterbacks we've ever seen. Maybe he does pull off for Trevor Lawrence and, does it as a freshman, but he's going to be still, even though they're both true freshmen, he's still going to be almost a year younger than what Trevor Lawrence was when he was a true freshman. So I think that this guy is going to, need some growth, but with his size, his arm strength, and his athletic ability, this is going to be something maybe we've never seen before in terms of talent. And this is going to be a guy who I believe is going to be one of the faces of college football in the near future. When we look at a team like Illinois, Illinois's got one of the top teams as well. This is going to be one of the most talented teams that the head coach has had probably in his tenure there. So, with the great return defensive players they have with Gabe, Jacobs, Xavier Scott, they returned the quarterback and Luke Altmaier. They are going to be young and trying to replace some guys at running back and receiver. But this is a team that, is going to be one of the most talented teams that they've had in Illinois in quite some time. And they should be either in the playoffs or probably just outside the playoffs. I think with their young receivers and young running backs, that's the one question I have for them. We know Illinois has always found, some competitive running backs. So I think a guy like Fagan or somebody else could emerge. And they probably will have someone emerge at wide receiver, but it's going to be one of the best defenses in college football, and you can have a very experienced quarterback. Indiana returns pretty much all their top defensive players with the cornerback, Pons, Fisher, linebacker, Kamara at edge rusher, along with a more talented quarterback transfer in Fernando Mendoza. He's a guy who was running for his life and didn't have a lot of talent in Cal, but still flashed NFL potential. And this is why you see NFL draft scouts talking about this guy as one of these quarterbacks that they're going to be watching as maybe anywhere between a first, second, or third round pick. Now he goes to a team like Indiana, who we know Indiana, where Kurt Sagnegi is going to be able to put him in favorable situations. And I think Mendoza is more talented and a better quarterback than Work, a quarterback that really flourished last year. So I think this is the Indiana team who's going to be much better. But I ultimately don't think that we'll finish as a better record because last year they kind of weren't, a target. No one really knew about Indiana. This was a team that was able to sneak up on teams and was kind of able to go under the radar. They're not going to be able to do that this year. And ultimately, I think because of that, they're going to be a target. Everybody's going to be up ready to play for them. So I don't think that they're going to be able to be as good as they are last year, even though they may be more talented. So when I look at the Big Ten Conference, I think Penn State, with the talent they have, I think this is the year they get over the hump. I think that they I think that they win the Big Ten. I'm not sure that they're going to have a perfect season. I'm still not sure if they could beat a team like Ohio State, but I think even with one loss, I think that they could still win the Big Ten. And I think this would be the year that they can beat Ohio State. I could possibly see them playing Ohio State in the Big Ten championship, and I think that they're going to win it. I'm going to go on a limb here and say that this is the year that Drew Aller and James Franklin can beat Ohio State and make the playoffs again. So I think Penn State wins the Big Ten. I think Ohio State and Oregon make the playoffs, and I think Michigan, Illinois, Indiana, Nebraska, and USC are all basically right around top 25 ranked caliber teams who are going to be very, very competitive as well. Ultimately, we got to talk about some other conferences as well. We got to be talking about, the next Power 4 conference, and that's the ACC. So we got to start off with the biggest storyline in the ACC, and that's Bill Belichick, who's going to be headed into his first year as the head coach of North Carolina. I'm really curious about this fit. I have no idea how it's going to work out. Bill Belichick's a coach who really can coach up guys, but when you go from coaching up 28-year-olds to 18 to 23-year-olds, guys who aren't as talented, is he going to be as patient with them? Can he recruit? Obviously in NFL you don't got to recruit. Can he go through the transfer portal? That's another thing we got to see. Is he going to be able to bring in the good transfers as well? Can he work with the young kids? Belichick, is a guy who is a no-nonsense guy. We've seen the stories that Julian Edelman has said about him and flipping out about certain things they can't do in practice. Well, how are these 18, 19-year-old kids are going to respond to that? You don't want to ruin these guys' confidence when they're just, young, guys trying to become grown men. And also, will Jordan Hudson be a distraction? We've seen it on the field before. I know Belichick's, typically been good, with not allowing his outside life to become a distraction. But we know ever since Jordan Hudson's come into the picture, it's been a complete different story. She's obviously, cutting him off during interviews, speaking up for him. I know she's kind of like a PR person, but it's something we've never seen before. So we shall see how he's going to be able to do with these new players. And this is the team that is a complete unknown. They have all new players, and they're very, very young and unknown at quarterback. They have a true freshman quarterback competing with another young quarterback in Gio Lopez. So we shall see. I don't think that this is going to be a playoff team. I don't think this is going to be a team that's going to hit 8 or 9 win mark. I think this is a team that will definitely be bowl eligible, definitely probably win, 6 to 7 games. But ultimately, I'm just not sold, on the ceiling, and I don't see it being any different than what years past was, even future down the line. I'm not sure if Bill Belichick's going to be the guy who wins 10, 11 wins in North Carolina and gets them to the playoffs. But we shall see. Like I said, it's a complete unknown, and I'm really curious to see how this all plays out. And then in general, when we look at the ACC conference, I think Clemson's going to be one of the best teams in college football. I think Clay Klubnik's going to be the best senior quarterback. The guy is so athletic. He reads defenses really well. He can move. He's improved each and every year. And now entering in his 4th year, he's a guy who I think is going to have the best year of his career and really establish himself as a potential first-round NFL draft pick. Ultimately, when you look at their receivers, this is a team that's going to have great return receivers. Antonio Williams could have went to the draft last year. He comes back. You got Wesco and more as well. So it's a very deep receiver group. You got a great O-line. So not only do you have a great quarterback, you're going to have players around him to make his job even easier. And when you combine that two, that's a very scary recipe for the rest of the ACC. Defensively, they're going to have the best defensive lineman in college football with Peter Woods. He's going to be one of the best defensive linemen to come out in the draft in a long time. This guy's unbelievable. 2, 3 guys can't block this guy. He just wreaks havoc. So you got the best defensive lineman. You're going to have one of the top 2 or 3 best edge rushers in TJ Parker as well. Both those guys could be top 5 NFL draft picks. You have a first-round potential corner in Terrell, and you got great defensive players around those guys as well. So I see this team being one of the best teams in college football and probably one of the best teams Dabo Swinney has had since he was a national championship team before. Also, I want to talk about Miami. They got a new quarterback coming in Carson Beck. I think now with an offensive line that can help block for Carson Beck, kind of keep him, upright. I think Carson Beck is the guy who could go back to playing like he did before. I think this is a offensive, line that will be able to put him in, very favorable situations. And I think this is the team who is also going to have some solid receivers around him. I think the reason why Carson Beck, struggled last year was I think Georgia didn't have the, one of their better offensive lines. Carson Beck is not the most mobile guy, and he really needs an offensive line to flourish. I also think Miami's going to have a very, what they had last year was a very young defense. Now I think that they'll have an experienced defense that would be very, very much improved. So I expect Miami to be, a great team. Last year they had a great offense, but they didn't have a great defense and had to win in shootouts. I think now they'll be able to have the good offense. Not saying, Carson Beck's not as good as Cam Ward, but he won't have to be because their defense is going to be much improved and they won't have to win shootouts. SMU is a team that I still will think will be solid as well. But again, they're going to be now a target. They're not going to be able to catch anybody off guard. They returned one of the best quarterbacks in college football in KJ Jennings. They returned some good, impactful secondary players and edge rushers. So I expect their defense to be good. And obviously, KJ Jennings is one of the best dual-threat quarterbacks, with his top returning receiver. I think this is a team that can be, just as talented as last year, but ultimately, I don't see them winning as many games as they did a year ago. So when I look at the ACC, I think Clemson wins the conference. I think Miami just barely sneaks into the playoffs. And I see SMU as a very competitive team who is a top 25 caliber team. Now, when we look at the Big 12, I think the Big 12, we got to start off with Deion Sanders. Now, obviously, Deion Sanders is probably, it's crazy to say this, but maybe the face of college football. But now the big thing is he's heading into his third year in Colorado, but it's his first year without Travis Hunter and his first year without Shedeur Sanders or Shiloh. So we shall see, how much of an impact those guys had. Shedeur Sanders was one of the best quarterbacks in all of college football, and Travis Hunter was the Heisman Trophy winner. So, can he have that same success as he had before? It's going to be interesting to see. I think they got very good assistant coaches to help out. And I do think Deion Sanders, without those guys, is still going to be a good head coach that can succeed. What's the ceiling of that? We shall see. I think they're going to have probably the best defense that they've had in the Deion Sanders tenure at Colorado. DJ McKinney in the secondary is going to be one of the top, defensive backs in all college football. He's getting a lot of NFL draft consideration. They're going to have a very impactful pass rush. And they're going to have one of the best offensive linemen with the second-year guy in Jordon. They're going to have a huge quarterback battle to replace Shedeur Sanders, and ultimately that's what their season is going to come down to. You got Caden Slater versus Juju Lewis. I think Slater, being the 22, 23-year-old experienced quarterback, I think he's the guy who should win the job, and I think Juju Lewis, being 18 years old, deserves and should get a year as a redshirt year and sit a year on the bench to really learn the system. I see this team taking a step back, but ultimately taking 2 steps forward in 2026. And I expect them to be much better in 2026. I see this team as a bowl-eligible team, and I see this team as a 6-win team because of their defense, because of their improved offensive line. They're still going to have great receivers. This team's always going to have speedy receivers and speedy running backs. I think they'll help a lot with the quarterback position. And Slater's a quarterback that has had success before. So I think this is a team that won't be as good as last year, but I think will still be better than the first year with Deion Sanders. So I see them as a bowl-eligible team, right around that 6-win mark. And then when we look at the rest of the Big 12, obviously you got Arizona State. They return. They lost their best player in Cam Scatterbo. We got to point that out. But they returned their next 2 best players in Jordan Tyson and Sam Levitt. Jordan Tyson could have been a first-round NFL wide receiver. He's coming back. He's a super young guy, so I think he made the right decision, and he can now improve his draft stock to maybe being a top 10 pick. Then you look at a guy like Sam Levitt. Sam Levitt's a guy who, if he could prove that he could win without Cam Scatterbo having to carry the team, he's got a first-round talent as the quarterback position as well. This is a team that also returns a lot of their defensive players as well, so I think being another year in college, I think their defense will be better. I think Jordan Tyson and Sam Levitt will combine for one of the best quarterback wide receiver duos in college football. So I think this is a team that can be just as successful as they were last year. Obviously, replacing Cam Scatterbo was no easy feat, but if you had to pick one position that would be easy to replace in college football, running back's one of the easier positions to replace. So we shall see, though. He was the heart and soul of the team. But I do think with Sam Levitt and Jordan Tyson, I think this is a team that can still be competitive and be a playoff team. I think when you look at the rest of the Big 12, one thing that stands out is the quarterback depth. There's so many great quarterbacks in the Big 12, NFL caliber guys, and there's so many returning guys like Sawyer Robinson at Baylor, Rocco Beck at Iowa State. You got Josh Hoover from TCU. You got Morton. You got Avery Johnson, who's got potential. You got Sorsby, you got Jalen Daniels, North Bafita, and others. This is a team, this is a conference that's so stacked at quarterback that, any given game can be decided by who's just the hotter quarterback. So it's ultimately going to be a very, interesting conference. In terms of how I see it playing out, I think Arizona State makes the playoffs again. I think that they win the conference. I don't see them maybe going as far as they did last year, but I definitely see them making the first round playoffs now. Again, just like I said with other teams, they're going to be a target now. So, we're going to see what they're going to do when, every team's going to be game plan for them now in the Big 12 and giving them their best matchup. But what Dillingham has done with this program, he's completely turned it upside down night and day. And now it's became one of the best programs in college football. And, if you're a 17-year-old kid, why would you not want to play for this program where they're so uplifting and they seem to treat their players so well? I see, Arizona State as the only team making the playoffs in this conference, but I could also see Kansas State, TCU, and Baylor being very competitive teams. Baylor was one of the highest teams in the college football last year with a great running back, some good receivers. Now with Robinson, those guys coming back, Baylor's a team that can sneak in and really surprise some people. And then overall, since we didn't get to the teams outside the top four, I think Notre Dame will make the playoffs as well. I think they're a team that's going to have one of the best secondaries again, led by the best cornerback in college football in Leonard Moore. C.J. Moore is a very, very talented quarterback. Yeah, he's a first-year starter, but I see him being very impactful. There's going to have one of the better receivers cores that Notre Dame's had in a long time. So look for the receivers to be much better. Their offensive line is the one thing we got to see. They have a very young offensive line. Can their offensive line find young players that can flourish? But typically Notre Dame usually figures out players that can play. So I expect Notre Dame to be a playoff caliber team. And then lastly, the last playoff team I have, there's always going to be a team from the G5 group of 5 conferences. I think Boise State repeats again. They returned their quarterback, who was one of the top quarterbacks in the group of 5. They're still going to be solid on defense. So look for Boise State to make the playoffs again. And if there's a team that can potentially play spoiler to that, I can see that potentially being Tulane. Then ultimately, now I gave you guys all my playoff picks. My national championship pick is going to, I'm going to give you guys my national championship pick now. So I've correctly predicted the last 2 national champions in a row. I said Ohio State was going to win it last year with the talent they had. I thought it was Michigan's year the year before. And I predicted 3 of the last 4 because I predicted Georgia's first national championship run as well. So this year, when I look at teams who I'm going to pick, I always pick a team who's got a quarterback returning, an experienced guy, a quarterback that's going to have weapons, going to have the O-line, going to have one of the best coaches, and is going to be having a great defense that can make the opposing quarterback in disarray. I think the team that stands out the most and the team that I'm going to predict to win the national championship this year is the Clemson Tigers. I think the Clemson Tigers are officially back. I think that they're going to be, as I said before, one of the best teams in college football. They got so many NFL draft talent on the offense and the defensive side of the ball. When you got an experienced quarterback like Cade Klubnik, you got all these great defensive players like Peter Woods and T.J. Parker and others. I just think this is a team that, when you see the way they finished last year, I think this is a team that can build on that. And they know that the type of heat that Dabo Swinney was getting at the beginning of last year, I think this is a team that's pissed off. They got something to prove. And with the returning players they have on both sides of the ball, I think this is a team that's too skilled. And I think this Cade Klubnik and them are just way too good. So this year I'm going to go with Clemson. I know it's kind of an outside pick, kind of a little different than everybody else, but I'm going to go Clemson to ultimately win the national championship this year in 2025. Obviously, my last prediction, we got the 2025 Heisman. Heismans are very tough to predict. I'll be honest with you guys. I haven't got this pick right once. I'm very, very much stronger with the national championship picks, but this year I'm going to go with Arch Manning. Yeah, I don't think Texas is going to win the national championship. I think that they'll get very close. They'll be one of the Final Four, or maybe the team that loses the national championship. And I think Arch Manning will learn from that and maybe win the national championship next year. But I think when we get to the playoffs, maybe Arch Manning will have some growing pains, just because of the atmospheres and trying to win and playing against the best teams. But in terms of the overall season, I think Arch Manning is going to be the best player. I think he's going to show his full skill set with his mobility and his passing and show how talented he is. And with the talent around him, it's going to be hard for him not to flourish. And we've seen how great other quarterbacks have done with like Quinn Ewers and others. Now you get a guy who's that much more talented. So I think Arch Manning is going to be the best player in college football this year. We've seen, these types of guys win Heisman trophies. We've seen Bryce Young at the first-year starter win the Heisman. We've seen Caleb Williams when he finally went to USC and had a full-year start, and he won the Heisman. I think Arch Manning is the next up. In terms of finalists, I think the next finalist will be Cade Klubnik. As I said before, I think they win the national championship. I think he's the best senior quarterback. Jeremiah Smith, who's just the best overall player in college football, so dynamic. I think he'll be the best non-quarterback, and we usually see a receiver or a non-quarterback that does get invited to New York City for the ceremony. So I think Jeremiah Smith's going to be there, and I think Drew Aller's going to be there. I think Drew Aller finally takes the next step. He finally shows what I've been saying that everybody makes fun of me for, the Josh Allen type potential. He improves his accuracy. He plays much better in the big games. So I got Arch Manning winning, and I got Kate Klubnik, Jeremiah Smith, and Drew Aller all being finalists and all being able to represent and be able to be part of the ceremonies in New York City. Well, now that's going to do it for all the previews. So now let's get into some actual games. We have one notable game this week for week 0, which is typical. Usually we get one game that's usually worth watching in week 0. But this is probably one of the best week 0 games we've seen in a long time. It's a ranked team versus a ranked team matchup. So we got number 22 Iowa State going up against number 17 Kansas State in Dublin, Ireland. Kansas State, it's moved back and forth from 3.5 to 3. Right now, as I'm recording this, it's a 3-point favorite for Kansas State. Iowa State lost their top 2 receivers in Higgins and Noel. That's going to hurt. They lost their best cornerback in Darian Porter as well. But they do bring back one of the most experienced quarterbacks in Rocco Beck. And I think they got some good running backs as well. So I think they'll rely more on the ground game to make up for their youth at wide receiver. And I think that besides their cornerback they lost, they return a lot of their other defensive stars as well. So I expect them to be very good defensively and very sound. I expect their offensive line to be good. And I expect them to have one of the best running back corps in the league as well, which they'll have to rely on. With Rocco Beck, who can, keep a clean game, not turn the ball over and win games. He knows how to win. I think this could still be a very competitive team. Kansas State has a very speedy NFL receiver in Jace Brown. They got a speedy running back as well. So this team's going to have a lot of speed. Again, this is another team that's going to be very sound on defense, who's going to have, day 3 NFL draft picks all over the defense. I just think what is going to come down to this Kansas State team is A.V. Johnson. Can A.V. Johnson become more consistent and not just be a runner? We know he's got the athleticism. We know he's got the arm talent. But can he actually be a consistent passer? And ultimately, I think that's what held Kansas State back. He's a young guy who's only 21 years old, and last year was his first year as the starting quarterback. So maybe he needed a year to grow. We shall see the improvement he does make in the offseason. If he can put together this Kansas State team, can be a team that sneaks up on a lot of people. But ultimately, I know Kansas State's the favorite team. I expect this game to be a very low-scoring game due to A.V. Johnson's inability to throw the ball. Until I see it, I'm going to keep saying that. So due to A.V. Johnson's inability to throw the ball, and also due to Iowa State losing their top receivers and having to replace those guys, I can see this being a very low-scoring game that ultimately is going to come down to who plays the cleaner football and who makes the bigger plays in the fourth quarter. And at this point in juncture, I'm going to have to go with Rocco Beck to have more faith in him. I have more faith in to rely on Rocco Beck to make those right decisions than Avery Johnson does. I also think Matt Campbell is one of the best coaches in college football, and I think he'll come up with a good game plan for Iowa State. So even though Kansas State's favored by 3, I'm going to go Iowa State to ultimately win this game. But, man, it's finally college football. It's finally week 0. Obviously, we got some minor games as well, but definitely make sure to stay tuned. That's going to do it for this episode. Make sure to stay tuned next week where we'll be wrapped into this game, anything else that happened in the college football world and landscape, and we're going to be also previewing all the big matchups. We got way more than one game to talk about next week. We got so many good games, including Texas and Arch Manning going up against Julian Sayin, Jeremiah Smith, and Ohio State. And we got some other games as well. So definitely make sure to stay tuned. That episode will obviously come next week, and anything else that happens in college football. So we'll be bringing you these college football episodes and shows each and every week. So ultimately, make sure that you not only watch this video, but make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel. Make sure that you also like and share this video to anybody that you know is a huge college football fan. And that's going to do it for this episode. Like I said, we're going to be bringing you stuff throughout the entire season. So definitely, if you're a huge football fan, definitely make sure you subscribe, and we'll catch you guys next week. We'll see you.